People were like, man, who is this guy? I had shaved, man. I shaved my beard off. And, my hair, because of the traumatic shock of terror, is snow white, right? So if I grow my hair out, some people like to dye it a lot. And it's a pain to dye your hair all the time. It is. So finally I decided, how do I want to live? And I said, well, I'll shave the whole thing. Starts growing in, I'll shave it again. Right? No more, and this is the thing. I never went to a barber after about like one time when the pandemic started and they were saying it was okay, mask off and stuff. And man, people were so careless at the barber about sanitary. But I'm starting the stream, and it's going to be hopefully an education stream. I want to bite into the shock of terror. Okay, let me see. I need the 4 start pages. This is Gutenberg. I just opened it up, and I haven't even put it on my layout. But see, this is the terror of the things of things. Let's see, 4 start pages. There it is. Experiment. Oh. Whew. Okay. That's, when you got, man, if that happens on 2 screens, on 2, it's like, man, you're blinded. Okay. So what I need, right, is I need my layout to be laid out. I don't know, sort of like this simplicity of things. So what am I going to do now? I am going to add a display capture. If you're using OBS, that's what I'm doing. I'm in the sources window, and I'm going to add an existing display capture, and it should be, is that perfect? It's perfection. All right, now I'm just going to drag myself back up to the top. Ooh. All right, so, what shall I do? I want to get a nice layout. It's really my forehead in the way. That's what it is. Hold on. That's better. All right. Help. No, I'm wound up. Okay. But it's okay. We're trying to get with it, get down. Now, I had been working on this book. I wanted to reread it. I don't think I've ever sat down. I've read big sections of it before. I don't think I've ever sat down. Ooh. This is where I was, I think. Philip is what I'm looking for. He calls that son of Philip as a way of saying Alexander. Let's see. How many have I got? Oh, Philip is mentioned in this a whole lot. Yeah, I found the exact spot where I left off. Okay. Yet the success of Tryon, however transient, was rapid and specious. It's a big word, specious. The degenerate Parthians, all those degenerate, broken by intestine discord. Now, oh yeah? Who said? You got proof of that? You got witnesses? Okay. Fled before his arms. He descended the river Tigris in triumph from the mountains of Armenia to the Persian Gulf. He enjoyed the honor of being the first as he was the last of the Roman generals who ever navigated that remote sea. His fleets ravaged the coast of Arabia and Trajan vainly flattered himself that he was approaching towards the confines of India. Every day the astonished Senate received the intelligence of new names and new nations that acknowledged his sway. Yeah, I did a photo shoot of that day. I went to England. They nabbed the dang. This emperor Trajan, we say. I think it's actually supposed to be something like Trajan, but that's all pretension. And it's trying my patience to say it, so I'll just say Trajan. Yeah, this guy had everything that he did carved in this big column, was spiraling up all these tableaus, friezes of embossed relief of things that happened. And I don't know how England got that. How you get that in London, in downtown and stuff? Oh, man. Y'all trying to show off with some industrial prowess or some moving big stone, massive things, across the planet. All right, so they were informed that the kings of Bosphorus, Colchos, Siberia, the Iberian Peninsula, Albania, Oshone, what is that? And even the Parthian monarch himself had accepted their diadems from the hands of the emperor, that the independent tribes of the Median and Carduchian hills had employed its protection, and that the rich countries of Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Assyria were reduced into the state of provinces. Wow. But the death of Trajan soon clouded this splendid prospect, and it was justly to be dreaded that so many distant nations would throw off the unaccustomed yoke when they were no longer restrained by the powerful hand which had imposed it. Okay, yeah. Okay, we don't need to dwell on those. Maybe I can get to sleep. That would be nice. Drinking coffee will help. Ooh, trying my patience. All right, the extent of the empire in the age of the Antonines, Part 2, was an ancient tradition when the capital was founded by one of the Roman kings, the god Terminus, who presided over boundaries and was represented according to the fashion of that age by a large stone. Alone among all the inferior deities refused to yield his place to Jupiter himself. A favorable inference was drawn from his obstinacy. Love that. Which was interpreted by the augurs as a sure presage that the boundaries of the Roman power would never recede. Oh yeah? During many ages, the prediction, as it is usual, contributed to its own accomplishment. But though Terminus had resisted the majesty of Jupiter, he submitted to the authority of the Emperor Hadrian. The resignation of all the eastern conquests of Trajan was the first measure of his reign. He restored to the Parthians the election of an independent sovereign, withdrew the Roman garrisons from the provinces of Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Assyria, and in compliance with the precept of Augustus, once more established the Euphrates as the frontier of the empire. Censure, which arraigns the public actions and the private motives of princes, has ascribed to envy a conduct which might be attributed to the prudence and moderation of Hadrian. What the? All right, wait a second. We got to go back here because, man, I think after 23, I was kind of, The resignation of all the eastern conquest of Trajan was the first measure of his reign. He restored to the Parthians the election of an independent sovereign, withdrew the Roman garrisons from the provinces of Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Assyria, and in compliance with the precept of Augustus, once more established the Euphrates as the frontier of the empire. Okay. Censure, which arraigns the public actions and the private motives of princes, has ascribed to envy a conduct which might be attributed to the prudence and moderation of Hadrian. What? Censure, which reigns to the public. Okay, so he's talking about censure, right? We know what that is. private motives, right? That's the key word here, of princes. Censure has ascribed to envy a conduct which might be attributed to the prudence and moderation of Hadrian. The various character of that emperor, capable by turns of the meanest and most generous sentiments, may afford some color to the suspicion. It was, however, scarcely in his power to place the superiority of his predecessor in a more conspicuous light than by thus confessing himself unequal to the task of defending the conquest of Trajan. Ooh, I'm still streaming and I'm zoning. I'm completely in the zone, man. I'm sorry. Um, okay, so this is where we are. The martial and ambitious spirit of Trajan formed a very singular contrast with the moderation of his successor. The restless activity of Hadrian was not less remarkable when compared with the gentle repose of Antoninus Pius. The life of the former was almost a perpetual journey, and as he possessed the various talents of the soldier, the statesman, and the scholar, he gratified his curiosity in the discharge of his duty. Careless of the difference of seasons and of climates, he marched on foot and bareheaded over the snows of Caledonia and the sultry plains of the Upper Egypt. Nor was there a province of the empire which in the course of his reign was not honored with the presence of the monarch. But the tranquil life of Antoninus Pius was spent in the bosom of Italy. And during the 23 years that he directed the public administration, the longest journeys of that amiable prince extended no farther than from his palace in Rome to the retirement of his Lanuvian villa. Lanuvian villa, that sounds great. Alright, so I'm just gonna try to go with the narrative and not focus on the notes right now. It gets too pedantic, yeah, or something like that. Notwithstanding this difference in their personal conduct, the general system of Augustus was equally adopted and uniformly pursued by Hadrian and by the two Antonines. How do we know this, buddy? They really got away with a lot back then. Yeah. They persisted in the design of maintaining the dignity of the empire without attempting to enlarge its limits. By every honorable expedient, they invited the friendship of the barbarians and endeavored to convince mankind that the Roman power, raised above the temptation of conquest, was actuated only by the love of order and justice. During a long period of 43 years, their virtuous labors were crowned with success, and if we accept a few slight hostilities that served to exercise the legions of the frontier, the reigns of Hadrian and Antoninus Pius offer a fair prospect of universal peace. Pax Romana, right? The Roman name was revered among the most remote nations of the earth. The fiercest barbarians frequently submitted their differences to the arbitration of the emperor, and we are informed by a contemporary historian that he had seen ambassadors who refused the honor which they came to solicit of being admitted into the rank of subjects. The terror of the Roman arms added weight and dignity to the moderation of the emperors. They preserved peace by constant preparation for war, and while justice regulated their conduct, they announced to the nations on their confines that they were as little disposed to endure as to offer an injury. The military strength, which it had been sufficient for Hadrian and the elder Antoninus to display, was exerted against the Parthians and the Germans by the Emperor Marcus. The hostilities of the barbarians provoked the resentment of that philosophic monarch, and, in the prosecution of a just defense, Marcus and his generals obtained many signal victories. Oh yeah? Both on the Euphrates and on the Danube. Supposedly, we can go there and see what this was. Dion this is where he got the crowd of contemptible historians whose memory has been rescued from oblivion and exposed to ridicule, and a very lovely piece of criticism of Lucian. Man, we should go look at that. I couldn't resist. I was like, I better not, focus on these notes or whatever, The military establishment, which thus assured either its tranquility or success, will now become the proper and important object of our attention. In the purer ages of the Commonwealth, the use of arms was reserved for those ranks of citizens who had a country to love, a property to defend, and some share in enacting those laws which it was their interest as well as duty to maintain. Interest. In their interest is what we say, I think now. But in proportion as the public freedom was lost in extent of conquest, war was gradually improved into an art and degraded into a trade. The legions themselves, even at the time when they were recruited in the most distant provinces, were supposed to consist of Roman citizens. That distinction was generally considered either as legal qualification or as a proper recompense for the soldier, but a more serious regard was paid to the essential merit of age, strength, and military stature. In all levies, a just preference was given to the claimants of the north over those of the south. The race of the men born to the exercise of arms was sought for in the country rather than in the cities, and it was very reasonably presumed that the hardy occupations of smiths, carpenters, and huntsmen would supply more vigor and resolution than the sedentary trades which are employed in the service of luxury. Right. After every qualification of property had been laid aside, the armies of the Roman emperors were still commanded, for the most part, by officers of liberal birth and education. But the common soldiers, like the mercenary troops of modern Europe, were drawn from the meanest and very frequently from the most profligate of mankind. That's very scary. Right. We're skipping this. Okay. That public virtue, which among the ancients was denominated patriotism, is derived from a strong sense of our own interest in the preservation and prosperity of the free government of which we are members. Such a sentiment, which had rendered the legions of the Republic almost invincible, could make but a very feeble impression on the mercenary servants of a despotic prince, and it became necessary to supply that defect by other motives of a different but not less forcible nature, honor and religion. The peasant or mechanic imbibed the useful prejudice that he was advanced to the more dignified profession of arms, in which his rank and reputation would depend on his own valor, and that although the prowess of a private soldier must often escape the notice of fame, his own behavior might sometimes confer glory or disgrace on the company, the legion, or even the army to whose honors he was associated. On the first entrance into the service, an oath was administered to him with every circumstance of solemnity. He promised never to desert his standard, to submit his own will to the commands of his leaders, and to sacrifice his life for the safety of the emperor and the empire. The attachment of the Roman troops to their standards was inspired by the united influence of religion and honor. The golden eagle, which glittered in the front of the legion, was the object of their fondest devotion. Nor was it esteemed less impious than it was ignominious to abandon that sacred ensign in the hour of danger. These motives which derived their strength from the imagination, were enforced by fears and hopes of a more substantial kind, regular pay, occasional donatives, and a stated recompense after the appointed time of service, alleviated the hardships of the military life, whilst on the other hand it was impossible for cowardice or disobedience to escape the severest punishment. The centurions were authorized to chastise with blows, the generals had a right to punish with death, and it was an inflexible maxim of Roman discipline that a good soldier should dread his officers far more than the enemy. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. From such laudable arts, Gibbon says, laudable arts. Well, that says a lot about you, sir, doesn't it? Did the valor of the imperial troops receive a degree of firmness and docility unattainable by the impetuous and irregular passions of barbarians, i.e. English people. Let's see. How are we doing on time? 21 minutes? Okay. How low can we go? Let's see. And yet so sensible were the Romans of the imperfection of valor without skill and practice, that in their language the name of an army was borrowed from the word which signified exercise. Military exercises were the important and unremitted object of their discipline. Like unceasingly they exercised, right? The recruits and young soldiers were constantly trained, both in the morning and in the evening, nor was age or knowledge allowed to excuse the veterans from the daily repetition of what they had completely learnt. Large sheds were erected in the winter quarters of the troops, that their useful labors might not receive any interruption from the most tempestuous weather, and it was carefully observed that the arms destined to this imitation of war should be double the weight which was required in real action. It is not the purpose of this work to enter into any minute description of the Roman exercises. Do you even know? Child. We shall only remark that they comprehended whatever could add strength to the body, activity to the limbs, or grace to the motions. The soldiers were diligently instructed to march, run, to leap, to swim, to carry heavy burdens, to handle every species of arms that was used either for offense or for defense, either in distant engagement or in a closer onset, to form a variety of evolutions, and to move to the sound of flutes in the Pyrrhic or martial dance. In the midst of peace, the Roman troops familiarized themselves with the practice of war, and it is prettily remarked by an ancient historian who had fought against them, that the effusion of blood was the only circumstance which distinguished a field of battle from a field of exercise. It was a policy of the ablest of generals and even of the emperors themselves to encourage these military studies by their presence and example, and we are informed that Hadrian, as well as Trajan, frequently condescended to instruct the unexperienced soldiers, to reward the diligent, and sometimes to dispute with them the prize of superior strength or dexterity. Under the reigns of those princes, the science of tactics was cultivated with success, and as long as the empire retained any vigor, their military instructions were respected as the most perfect of Roman discipline. How we doing? I'm looking here. Hold on a second. I like this better to start off. All right. 9 centuries of war had gradually introduced into the service many alterations and improvements. The legions, as they are described by Polybius in the time of the Punic Wars, differed very materially from those which achieved the victories of Caesar, or defended the monarchy of Hadrian and the Antonines, or whatever it is. The constitution of the Imperial Legion may be described in a few words. The heavy armed infantry, which composed its principal strength, was divided into 10 cohorts and 55 companies under the orders of a correspondent number of tribunes and centurions. The first cohort, which always claimed the post of honor and the custody of the eagle, was formed of 1,105 soldiers, the most approved for valor and fidelity. The remaining 9 cohorts consisted each of 555, and the whole body of legionary infantry amounted to 6,100 men. Their arms were uniform and admirably adapted to the nature of their service: an open helmet with a lofty crest, a breastplate or coat of mail, greaves on their legs, and an ample buckler on their left arm. The buckler was of an oblong and concave figure, 4 feet in length and 2.5 in breadth, framed of a light wood, covered with a bull's hide and strongly guarded with plates of brass. Besides a lighter spear, the legionary soldier grasped in his right hand the formidable pilum, a ponderous javelin, that's what it was, whose utmost length was about 6 feet, and which was terminated by a massy triangular point of steel of 18 inches. Ouch! This instrument was indeed much inferior to our modern firearms, since it was exhausted by a single discharge at the distance of only 10 or 12 paces. Yet when it was launched by a firm and skillful hand, there was not any cavalry that durst venture within its reach, nor any shield or corselet that could sustain the impetuosity of its weight. An object in motion will remain in motion until acted upon by an outside force. As soon as the Roman had darted his pilum, he drew his sword and rushed forwards to close with the enemy. His sword was a short, well-tempered Spanish blade that carried a double edge and was alike suited to the purpose of striking or of pushing, but the soldier was always instructed to prefer the latter use of his weapon, as his own body remained less exposed, while he inflicted a more dangerous wound on his adversary. The legion was usually drawn up 8 deep, and the regular distance of 3 feet was left between files as well as ranks. A body of troops habituated to preserve this open order in a long front and a rapid charge found themselves prepared to execute every disposition which the circumstances of war or the skill of their leader might suggest. The soldier possessed a free space for his arms and motions, and sufficient intervals were allowed through which seasonable reinforcements might be introduced to the relief of the exhausted combatants. The tactics of the Greeks and the Macedonians were formed on very different principles. The strength of the phalanx depended on 16 ranks of long pikes, wedged together in the closest array, but it was soon discovered by reflection, as well as by the event, that the strength of the phalanx was unable to contend with the activity of the legion. The cavalry, without which the force of the legion would have remained imperfect, was divided into 10 troops or squadron. The first, as the companion of the first cohort, consisted of 132 men, while each of the other 9 amounted to only 66. The entire establishment formed a regiment, if we may use the modern expression, of 726 horse, naturally connected with its respective legion, but occasionally separated to act in the line and to compose a part of the wings of the army. The cavalry of the emperors was no longer composed, like that of the ancient republic, of the noblest youth of Rome and Italy, who, by performing their military service on horseback, prepared themselves for the offices of senator and consul, and solicited by the deeds of valor the future suffrages of their countrymen. I don't think people can understand this kind of sentence anymore, because I noticed that, you guys. Reading is a skill, right? You should read a little bit. Because, all right, so let's look at that. The cavalry of the emperors was no longer composed like that of the ancient republic of the noblest youths of Rome and Italy. So how was the ancient republic composed, right? The nobles, who, and then it's going to talk about how they were, right? By performing their military service on horseback, prepared themselves for the offices of senator and consul. Now, it sounds like they're easy, and solicited by deeds of valor the future suffrages of their countrymen. Votes, Since the alteration of manners and government, the most wealthy of the equestrian order were engaged in administration of justice. Judges, buddy. Yeah. Top dog lawyers. And of the revenue. And whenever they embraced the profession of arms, they were immediately entrusted with a troop of horse or a cohort of foot. Trajan and Hadrian formed their cavalry from the same provinces and the same class of their subjects, which recruited the ranks of the legion. The horses were bred for the most part in Spain or Cappadocia. The Roman troopers despised the complete armor with which the cavalry of the East was encumbered. Their more useful arms consisted in a helmet, an oblong shield, light boots, and a coat of mail. A javelin and a long broadsword were their principal weapons of offense. The use of lances and of iron maces they seem to have borrowed from the barbarians. The safety and honor of the empire was principally entrusted to the legions, but the policy of Rome... You know what? I don't even have a chat box on this thing, like at all. That's okay. All right. I can see it. Here, I can see the chat. See how we're doing. Yeah, okay, we made the 30-minute mark. Let's see. Let's stop it here. And I'll go message my buddy with this weird cryptic message paragraph from Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Yeah. The earliest books. All right. So, see you later.